Welcome to Beyond Stereo, the Dolby Atmos podcast. I'm Dan Bucknell, and here we talk about the world of immersive technologies aimed at creating more meaningful and emotional experiences for music, film, and just about everything else. Today's guest is Justin Gray, a leading immersive audio engineer in the music industry. He's remixed legends like Snoop Dogg in Dolby Atmos and is at the forefront of spatial audio innovation. Let's dive deep into the future of music with Justin Gray. Thanks for jumping on, man. I really appreciate it.
Pleasure.
We've got so many cool things we can talk about here. When we first connected, I think you were trying to get into the Facebook group, actually, was my first introduction to you. Do you remember that?
Right. Okay. That is a while back.
Yeah, I was actually the one that let you in there. So,
well, and thank you for doing that, and thank you for the work that you do there. I think it's one of the fun things about the entire world of spatial audio is the community. Completely
agree with that. Yeah, I think it's a fun sort of exploration that we're all on to just get stronger with this. Obviously, you've probably got way more experience than I have in the format, but I just joined that. I think somebody was looking for help moderating the site, and I'm like, I would love to meet more people and just see what everyone else is doing. What better way than to help manage the group? So yeah, that's sort of how that began. Yeah, tell me about what you do, and maybe our audience doesn't know exactly. A brief overview of maybe Dolby Atmos and Sony and things like that. But yeah, what is it that you contribute in your area?
Yeah, specifically in the spatial area. If we're talking about right now, I'm mixing and mastering quite regularly in the Dolby Atmos format. Now, what is the content? It varies from what I'll refer to as spatial remixing. So remixing content, a lot of pop music along, pretty wide range of genres. And we'll, probably get into some of that as we go. So I'll save it for later. But so, yeah, the concept of artists who have already created their songs and want to have three-dimensional versions of them. And so I'm doing a lot of that work in Dolby Atmos on a regular basis. That's primarily as a mix engineer, where, of course, mastering is a part of it. And maybe we'll discuss that today. But also as a mastering engineer, both in stereo and in immersive, specifically Atmos right now. My day-to-day outside of spatial audio, for the last decade, the most common thing that I'm doing is stereo mastering. So, I come through a pretty long sort of musical journey, all the way from being a bassist through being a recording engineer and a producer and a composer and a whole bunch of other sort of areas. But stereo mastering is somewhere that I've been for quite some time and really love the work, love being in that mindset. And so even when I entered into the immersive world, mastering was on my mind. And so I do have the opportunity as well to work with engineers and producers largely who sort of reach out and are looking to, just finalize their Atmos work. Now, you did mention Sony 360. This is a format that I got in the day it started, and it still is technically floating around in the ether as of right now, but certainly the format has slowed at the moment to a place where I think they're figuring out where it best sits.
Right.
We'll see in this conversation whether we go into that or not. But at one point, I did a significant amount of work, and it was sort of like Atmos and 360 were sort of tandem. Where at the moment, it certainly has slowed down. And like I said, I just think it's about Sony figuring out where they best fit into this ecosystem, because I think that Dolby knew what they wanted and have really done an amazing job. Maybe we'll explore some of that of figuring out where their niche is and how to serve it.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was going to ask a bit more about 360 because probably, we talk about anything immersive in this on this podcast. That could be anything from just storytelling at its core all the way to the technologies we use to do that. So we've had filmmakers and musicians and all kinds of different people that do so many different things to that end. And then Dolby Atmos is obviously sort of the buzzword for me. That's the area I prefer to work in. But probably a lot of people don't know what 360 is and how it differs from Atmos maybe. So could you go just a little bit into that and how you came about, both of those formats?
Absolutely. So, how I get into this world of, beyond two-channel audio production.
Beyond stereo,
yeah. Exactly. Is into 5.1 and into surround work. First, honestly, as an audiophile, as a listener, I have a pretty awesome SACD and DVD-A collection, and then eventually into Blu-ray as well. But yeah, I got into it because of my love of film. I would watch movies that way, but then eventually, just buying discs, buying soundtracks, like just listening. And so
Yeah.
I was very fond of it. Even, I don't know, we go back probably about 15 years. It was just like, okay, I'm going to set up a 5.1 system in the studio. At that time, actually, it was Adams. So I'm looking in.
I can see some atoms there, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And so
Love that.
the 5.1 began as a listening area, and I connected to it artistically immediately. I just loved it. The concept of it, I think, is, into today when we talk about some of the creation that I'm doing, that's where it begins. Is like as soon as I realized it was possible, I think it really just went into the core of how I want to think about music. But realistically, I'm not, I don't work on a cinema remix stage. I very much have been in the music sphere, although I am fond of film and have gone in and out of working on films, both as a composer and as a sort of pre-mixer. It never really landed career-wise. Like that's not where I was pushing. I was still very much on the music side of production and mixing and mastering. And so, I don't know, trying to find places 10 years ago even, or even more than 10 years ago, where anybody outside of essentially the classical or film world wanted to make music in 5.1 was not really happening.
Yeah.
We were at the bottom of that, post 5.1 period at that time. Like that was truly the end of that era. But that didn't matter to me. It was still just awesome and creative and something that was musically enticing to me. So I made a lot of music. I was making music. I was remixing music. I was finding sort of film jobs here and there where maybe I could work with the composer to do stem premixing for film. And that's what led me to understand Atmos. Was as soon as I was able to go to a soundstage, bring the stems that I'd prepared, and then I'd be the fly on the wall in the back. I experienced it. Of course, I also experienced it in the movie theater, just going to see movies. But it's different when you're in a soundstage. You experience it at that level of fidelity. I started to understand. The first time I saw objects was in that context, and it completely blew my mind. I mean, it was like, yes, this is okay. Now you're taking 5.1, and this is what we can do with it. And so all of that, it's truly is, and especially at a time when, like, that's at a time there's no discussion of it whatsoever in music, but basically, even from that moment, I just sort of wanted there to be. And slowly but surely, I mean, that's like, I can't remember exactly the first time I was in one, but realistically, Atmos comes into the field around 2012, so it's probably after that. And then by about 2015, I had internally made a decision to get into it, just to build the 714. Now, that doesn't happen overnight, especially like I'm an independent engineer. There was literally no work, no ask for it, no discussion of it, except for whispers at AES, because of course Oro 3D was already there. Some of my, I would consider colleagues and mentors were already presenting music, in Immersive, where we had Oro was there, and people like Stefan Bach and Morten Lindberg, Jim Anderson, of course some of the like Leslie Ann Jones. I'm missing a couple there, but there's more. They were already sort of, I'd heard some musical things, but it wasn't Atmos yet. And as soon as I understood the object side and what its potential was, and then as soon as someone mentioned somewhere along the way the idea of binaural, the idea of headphones, the idea that this could come to music, I was already basically building it. And that was just like a double down moment where it's like, this makes sense. This, as a delivery container for creative intent, it's brilliant. Even completely. Technology aside, anything else aside, it's a totally logical way to deliver multi-channel audio. And that's really what it is, right? It's a digital container. It's an object-based container of creative intent.
That is a beautiful way to say that. That's exactly right. I have the same sort of story, actually, coming from music, a little bit of introduction into 5.1, same as you. And then I think I went to 7.1 before, like Atmos was on my mind. It was already a thing. But it was like, look, I can't really justify it until there's a real need. 5.1 is still the standard for everything, other than music, of course, just mainly films where I work. And then I think, when the music thing came out and they announced that, was it Dolby put out a video specifically that was talking about introducing Dolby Atmos to music. That revolutionized everything. And that was like, okay, now's the time to do that, because that's now achievable for all of everything that we do. That's definitely the next standard. And I saw that. I was like, that is it. Now's the time. So I went ahead and started prepping it. I think I was working in 9.1 for a while with wides before I even had heights, which is crazy. But
That's awesome.
I really liked doing that. And then I figured out sort of this weird makeshift way to get heights happening without, in renting a house with completely not ideal situations. But I was like, look, I'm determined to figure out how I do this. So I get started. And sort of now it's become, I have a 914 here that I just, this is a bedroom, but it's great for most of the stuff that I do is pre-mixing until I go to somewhere else. And I put a lot of time into learning about that as best as I could, to then be able to understand what people do, how people do this. And I think that's very much similar to your story there, just having the love for it and just going, this is awesome no matter what. That's the reason we should do anything, right? Like just making cool stuff. That's what we want to do. That's what we want to bring to people. And it's kind of the way you said it, the digital container that houses the creative intent and brings that, no matter where you listen to it, back to the audience is ultimately what it's all for.
Absolutely.
So it's a really, really cool way to say it. So it's funny that our journeys really overlap there.
I think so, absolutely. I mean, for me, maybe one of the differences is that even though film is where it starts for me, it's really not where I've been. Like I was in like wanting to make records the whole time. So, which is really like niche within a niche, right? Already from the beginning. So by the time I had my speakers set up, and actually where I am right now is a friend of mine's studio. There's a little bit of a reno going on at mine for the next little bit. So I moved in some stuff, and he's got a great Atmos system here. And then, but normally I'm working in now 11.16. So that's,
wow.
For the...
Is that two wides behind you as well?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
So I array... I array the side surround with the sort of rear wide surround position. But not all the time, but if I'm doing film prep, it really helps with translation. And also because of the angle that they're at, it also allows me to have a more natural 5.1 listening position.
Oh, I was about to say that. Yeah, that's exactly it.
Really sweet. Because as a 5.1 listener, it's like it's the side 90-degree thing. I really don't like listening to 5.1 with that. It's wrong. I'd much rather have them at 130, for instance. I'd much rather have 5.1 come out of the rear surrounds.
I do that even. That's what I'm doing right now.
It's better. But in this case, I actually have different settings where it's like, 5.1, boom, it goes to those ones. So,
that is awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, but to get back to it is that right around 2017, I had it plugged in. I was like, okay, I'm wired up. I can work in discrete channel 714, but the renderer didn't really exist yet. It wasn't quite there. So I was contacting Kerry Thomas, who was at Dolby at the time, and just actually, funnily enough, and he knows this. I laugh about the story, but I couldn't get through to anybody. So I pretended for a second that I was starting a soundstage in Toronto. All of a sudden, I got a call back.
I'm sure you did.
And right when I got on the phone with Carrie, I was like, Carrie, this is who I am. I'm definitely not starting a soundstage, but I definitely have a 714 setup of Lipinski's. I know this is going to happen. I'm ready. I'm like, what can I do? And he's sort of like, whoa, hold your horses. We're getting there right now. At that time he's working with the folks at Capitol, Steve and Dolby, and everybody is Nick, they're getting together and figuring it out on their end. So I'm sort of right there from Toronto and the, way up northeast. And then they're sort of figuring it out in LA also with Maurice and PMC. That was the team that I've later learned was doing that at that time. And so I got that, the very first renderer, muscled through it. But the very first thing I did with Atmos, actually, the first thing is I took a previous record of mine, which was a pretty, sort of chamber-based world music, world jazz kind of orchestral kind of thing. Not recorded for Immersive, not composed for Immersive, but I tore it down back to the multi-tracks and completely remixed it. Wow. That's the first thing I did in object-based audio. And it started with my music because I was like, this is at the core, that's what I always wanted. It's like, this is just how I hear music and this is how I want to be able to express my music. Then I started taking, either multi-tracks, tracks, or stems from records that I'd produced, anything I had access to, remix it, bring folks over. Even that in 2017, 2018, they're like, cool, that's amazing. What can we do with this?
It now?
I was like, nothing. There's nothing you could do unless we would have put it on Blu-ray. And one of the earliest ones that did go to Blu-ray is a friend of mine named Jonathan Kotchuk, Canadian from out west, in Vancouver at the time. He's in a different part of Canada now. Made a crazy, amazing record for 714, not for Atmos, specifically for 714.
Okay. So a channel-based version of it, essentially.
Channel-based record. He composed it that way, but he did it all in headphones. It's called Everywhen. I would encourage anyone to go check it out. It is still, to this day, one of the wilder projects I've ever worked on.
That's cool.
And Jonathan taught me a lot. We worked on that thing. It was actually Carrie who put us in touch because Jonathan was like, oh, it might have been in around that time that Dolby maybe made one of those videos. And I'm pretty sure the video you're referring to would have been right at the time that they announced Tidal taking it on, which I think is
possibly
like 2019. And that's the first.
That sounds about right.
That's the first time that there was sort of that final commercial confirmation that's like, yep, they are actually going to try to enter into the music sphere. But it was still such a closed loop. I had all this music prepared, and I remember calling Carrie and a couple other folks and they're like, yeah, this is very much a major label thing right now. Like you can't even do distribution unless you're with Sony or UMG or Warner. Basically, like you can't get your music on Tidal. It's not going to happen. Yeah. So obviously Apple was next, and that was still 2 years later.
Was it really? Wow, I didn't realize that.
Apple wasn't until 2000. Well, a year and a half. It wasn't until 2020, right? It was wasn't it 2020? Yeah.
Maybe you're right.
I think it's 2020. It's in COVID. It's like not too far into it, as far as I remember.
Wow. Maybe I just had a incorrect memory there, but that's crazy that Apple was after Tidal. But yeah.
Oh, Apple was after Tidal for sure. No, Tidal was first. So I had an Apple TV and I could stream the 25 songs that were available.
Oh my God.
And you know what? I'd already been at that point. Other than my big collection of classical music and old discs, I never heard anybody else's anything. I just made it the way I heard it. And it was cool because it was the first time where there was just like, okay, there's some other people making some pop records, and okay, I like that. But there was 20 of them.
I would consider myself an early adopter of Atmos, particularly in Australia. There wasn't that many people when I was doing it who were interested or even knew what it was. But then, you're at the very beginning. That's like before anybody's done it, really. It's very, very, very new.
And actually, I was a year off. It was June 7th, 2021 that Apple started.
Okay, wow. There you go. Even later.
June 7th. That's in a week. It's actually the world premiere of a project of mine. That's only 4 years. It's only been 4 years.
That's insane. Wow. Well, and how much material is now out just in those 4 years?
A significant amount. A significant amount.
Labels are pretty much requiring it for a lot of things now.
Yep. There was, so when that happens, so I go from working completely on my own things with essentially no commercial viability, but tons of creative viability, which is more important.
Absolutely.
But no commercial viability. Now, during that period, especially when Tidal happened, because I am an engineer, I'm also a producer and musician from Toronto, so I have relationships with various people in the industry. So I had folks from UMG come in, or folks from Sony's, folks from Warner. As soon as there was anybody talked about needing it, that Dolby list, there was 20 people on that. And so there was, it was a time when there was just straight cold calls. This is not the case anymore, but there was cold calls. I mean, I remember Columbia Records just calling and being like, "Who are you and why can you do this?" And I was like,
Cool.
"Okay, this is who I am. Like, send me the files. I'll send you something in a couple of days, and I think you'll really like it." And,
Great.
so it sort of happened that way, just from being at the very front of it, whatever that means. I mean, I'm not alone, of course. There's a list
Yeah,
of
yeah.
folks who are there, but yeah, like 2021, the day that Apple announced spatial audio and they put out the Marvin Gaye song with the video and with the audio, that whole breakdown.
Yep. You can find that on Dolby's website. They have that still where you can sort of bridge the binaural between the stereo and see the. Yep, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so
Go look at that, people who are watching.
Yeah, I mean, that was a big day. It was Zane Lowe did the whole announcement of it, and
Yep.
I was aware that it was going to come because I had already been asked by a lot of people to prepare a lot of songs in a very short period of time, because they, some of the labels knew in advance, a little bit in advance, that they had these requests to have some content available. But Apple, they're pretty close to the chest, so it was like tight, maybe 2 weeks before kind of thing. All of a sudden, I was like 5 years of trying to share it with people, and then suddenly
explosion. Yeah,
all needs to happen. But since that time, I've been very honored to develop a lot of relationships with labels, and then of course that eventually gets to producers, it gets to engineers, it gets to artists. Most importantly, the artists. To be able to do that process, to be a part of spatially remixing their music, and it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful opportunity to creatively reimagine, somebody's art, and to bring meaning to it in 3 dimensions. It's
100%.
And that's what Atmos is doing. And I mean, at the same time, you said it earlier, the buzzword thing. So Atmos comes in like, we're here and we've changed the world forever. It's like, yeah, but yes, in the sense that nobody has ever. Also, Dolby's been a part of this. Like, they've earned a seat at the table, right? Like, they've been a part of surround the entire time. But they're not the first immersive format. They're not the first avenue for expressing creative music. I mean, we even, when we talk about acousmatic composers and electroacoustic composers, when we talk about even like a good example would be going back to the 40s to Walt Disney and Fantasound. I mean,
absolutely.
He made a quad system and installed it.
I thought it was quad.
He installed it himself in movie theaters just so people could watch his movie the way he wanted them to. That's awesome.
Hell yeah, it is.
That's in the 40s. Like, this is a long time ago. So, there, and then of course the 5.1 and film has exploded the thing. Installation art, like, Janet Cardiff, like those kinds of installations that have been, there's so much history here. There's so much aesthetic runway that leads us to this moment. But commercialization is a part of art. It always has been.
It always has been, yeah. They go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other, unfortunately. And it's one of those things, a lot of artists would agree that, it's like, well, the art wants to come first. Yes, of course, but you can't do that without the funding and the commercialization, as you said. And then it's just always going to be that way. But yeah, like, that's not necessarily a bad thing, because if it's more widely available, like you were saying, now we can do this and it hits more. More people can experience this and feel those emotions that we're trying to convey with this technology. That's what it's for at the end of the day.
There have been ways to make it possible. Again, including Oro 3D, like, took a real, and Oro's still around. It's a fantastic format. It's discrete channel. It's high resolution. There's no spatial coding. It's like a mini IMAX where they're like, you have to listen to it initially. Now they've become more flexible, but like, you have to listen to it with this many speakers. It's always going to be full linear PCM. No funny business. Get the speakers. That's it. That's why I love IMAX. You go to the theater, if you want to just like know that it's going to be 1,000%.
Yeah.
You see the IMAX version.
If it's intended to be watched as IMAX and they've created that way, then that's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, because then they're just, and the theaters are built with this very high tolerance spec where it's like, this is what it is. Yes. But in this whole journey, the problem has been the limited capacity to share the art.
Yeah.
Someone who makes a beautiful art installation. Well, they have the first thing to remember is like, I think of it like a sculptor. Someone makes a beautiful sculpture in the middle of a Italian piazza or something. Well, you want to see it? You go. And if you don't go, you could look at a photo of it and it might inspire you. It might be really nice. You might even you never need to see it and still be, brought to great emotion through just the photo itself. But surely, if you make your way there and you stand in front of it, you will be moved in a different way.
Completely.
The nature of its size, its realism, it's the three-dimensionality, the organic nature of it. And immersive audio is no different. So if for those who have made these brilliant installation pieces that are quite profound, or something like Aura, where it's like, well, you either hear it this way or you don't in the early days, that's cool. It's totally fine. We always have the ability to make decisions about how much commercialization needs to relate to our art. But if the limitations that have been imposed upon the immersive world have held it back from a significant body of people, it's just cost.
Yeah.
It's cost, it's access, it's technology. It's just, so it means that it's been a very niche art form, even though I think actually a lot of those artists would be very happy to share it with more people should there be somehow a way to do it.
Insert Atmos.
They got it. I mean, even when they went to the movie theaters, they're like, okay, IMAX does its thing. No, we'll be more flexible with the cinema owners. We'll say, fine, how many speakers can you have? Okay, fine. You can have 36. Yeah, we got you. We'll just type it into the renderer and it'll work. Oh, you have 34. Okay, no problem. Oh, you have 45. Okay, we got you. That whole concept is that flexibility, right? And it's really leaning into object-based audio in a commercialized way that has not been seen before it. And it's leaning into, again, that object-based delivery container of intent and saying, this is a very, very powerful tool if it's used properly. Now, does it come with its sacrifices? Sure. There are times when we listen to a fold down in 5.1 of something we created in 9.1.6, and is it a reduction of the initial artistic intent? Well, you could see it that way for sure. And of course, the binaural conversation. Is the binaural the exact same as the 9.1.6? No. But it still is an accessible, meaningful version of that music. And if it's done with great care, it can still absolutely contain the intent of the music, the essence of the music, and even some of the spatial attributes of the music. And if that means that we can now, if we want to harness that technology, and it means we can now access millions of people rather than tens of thousands, that's a pretty sizable argument.
I completely agree. I think there's like, to simplify and just sort of go over what you've just said there, that's really important, that there's always been the choice to, all right, somebody can decide to put in a 5.1 or 7.1 or whatever system into their house. They've got that choice, but it's very expensive to do that. So it's only been the people that could afford it that could then actually hear the music at all. Otherwise, they're losing channels. Like that, there's no way to do that with Atmos and object-based audio. Anything in the spatial realm allows the scale down to happen so that it's even possible to get any iteration of it where there wasn't a possibility for that at all before that. So, I mean, that's the answer to that problem, I suppose. That's why 5.1 didn't work for music when you were exploring that and sort of coming up. That's why Atmos is the answer, which is revolutionizing the whole place.
And at least, obviously we're both like, we're both in doctrine here. Like we've both drunk the punch. So,
That's true.
And I love the folks at Dolby, but I also think that it's healthy for us as a community to discuss things as openly and honestly as possible. It's the answer right now.
That's right. Yeah.
Should continue to be the answer. There's no reason that it won't continue to be. But as with all technology, this is a massive stepping stone forward. And it opens up, hopefully, like this. Yeah, this is where, so technology and art, this time, Atmos is technology taking a big step. Even if there's this prior runway of like a massive amount of content. And I will preface this by saying anyone who ever states, oh, Atmos is the Wild West, is ignoring, let's see, if I go back to the 40s, it is ignoring, in my opinion, like between 70 plus years worth of music making. I'm not saying there are rules. I'm just saying that there's a massive aesthetic runway that has led to exactly where we are right now. And you can listen to it all, and you can study it like any tradition. And so therefore, the idea that there are no norms or there are no best practices or that there are no at least trial and error periods along the way that have already been done hundreds of times is missing a massive part of the history of what we're doing.
Completely.
I digress.
You're right, though.
Yeah, but now we're at this place where as we move forward, Dolby took the step. They came in, quite frankly, they even took a step like even maybe before the technology was perfectly ironed out. That first period with Apple was, there was some translation issues but whatever, they took the step. At some point, someone's got to do it. They did it. Then they took such a large step that I still think art is catching up, which is pretty impressive. I mean, I got to give it to that. That's a big thing to do, to take a step so large that 4 years of music making, and I still feel like people are still just discovering the potential of it, myself included. Yeah. However, it is art's time now. We have 4 years. We have this runway. We've pushed it, and a lot of people who care very deeply about what they do and are very talented have put millions of songs into the world. Mostly, since the advent of Atmos, has been spatial remixing. Not all of it, but the majority of it. The concept of let's remix a song that was once this, stereo usually, and let's reimagine it. And it can be the best. It's so great. It's such a great way to listen to the music. It's three-dimensional. It's more dynamic. There's so many positives. But for me, I do think that now the next step, it has to get into the art. It has to be the art. Because that's how it works. Well, just like that's how this works. And so, for instance, think of a pipe organ is technology. At some point, I wish I knew the history better. So someone listening to this who knows the history of the pipe organ, they can call me and tell me. I'll gladly listen. I'll pay them for their time for them to educate me. What a crazy piece of technology. It truly is the most aggressive piece of musical technology.
It's full on, and they're massive.
It's so massive. It's truly an immersive instrument at its fullest. Well, you can't have pipe organ music until the pipe organ exists. Of course, it's a stepping stone game, but at a certain point, something has to take a leap. The same with piano or instruments, concert halls. The whole concept of the proscenium and the concert hall, that's technology. And then you build it, and then the composers and the artists and the ensembles, they push it to the point when now we don't think of we think of the concert hall as a container for the art. But somewhere along the line, it would have been like, okay, well, now we've got this. What do we do with this?
And then they fill it to make use of it. Yeah, exactly.
They fill it, and the ensemble grows. Like the same with a symphony orchestra. Until you have the violin, I mean, heck, until they figure out how to have the violin, it's like all of these things are this constant stepping game. So I'm personally very passionate about the next step. I don't know if it's the right foot or the left foot, but what the next step is in the artist's hands, and it's in the creators, and it's getting into what does this really offer us? Is it offers a canvas for music making. And that's, for instance, that's what the album that I'm releasing very soon is all about. It's a 5-year process of making music the way that I've heard it and wanting to at least contribute to what I'm describing.
So this album that you've been working on, do you want to just tell people, like, give it a full, sort of overview of like the title and what's been involved, how it's all been going and where you're at?
Absolutely. So it's called Immersed. It's a record of music that I composed specifically for immersive audio. And And, I'll discuss what that means a bit more in a second. But yeah, I set out to sort of make music, some compositions and some just ideas that had sort of been brewing around for quite some time. I'd say I started writing some of the music about 5 years ago, finishing it roughly 4 years ago or getting there. And for the last 3 years, it's been ongoing. So the major recording sessions were about getting close to about 3 years ago. There's 38 artists involved. It's a huge project. The musicians are largely all Canadian artists and some of my favorite musicians on the planet. I'm playing bass on the record, as well as bass vina, which is an instrument that I designed for Indian music. There's a huge...
You designed it?
Yeah.
Okay. We want to come back to that because you made an instrument. That's amazing. Okay.
I did. Now, the luthier was Les Godfrey, so I didn't craft it, but I did invent it.
Wow.
So yeah, there's a large influence here of certainly, like, I would still call the core of the music in the world of contemporary jazz music, which largely means, instrumental contemporary improvised music. But a lot of Indian classical influence. I've studied Indian classical for music over the last 2 decades. At one point I lived in India studying the music very seriously, with a singer, with a vocalist there. So Hindustani classical music. And there's electronic influences, there's chamber influences. I mean, my entrance into music, like I said maybe earlier, is as a bassist. Then until about a decade ago, I was a full-on touring, performing bassist, 200 nights a year. Jazz in this core of it, but I've played in most styles of music professionally, recording, touring, the whole of it. And Toronto's an amazing hub in the world for music at a very high level. So anyways, to the record, the concept of it was, of course, started with the composition, started with writing music and really thinking of the canvas being in 3 dimensions. And so that led me to record it that way. And, the ability to produce this record knowing that it was going to be in immersive the whole time. And now I say immersive, but at a certain point, like, I did know, sort of like our conversation earlier, I made the decision that I did want to harness the Dolby Atmos technology. That as an artist, I do want to be able to share this music in flexible ways. Realistically,
Nice.
I wrote the music in 916. Now, actually, I'd say I wrote the music in 906. The LFE is not compositional content, it's mixing content. So I orchestrated the music for 15 locations. That means down to how many voices are happening, where the harmonies are, where the instruments are located, how many instruments there are, what harmonies go where. I really used those, 9 on the lower level, as you know, and then 6 on the upper layer as very specific anchor points for what that dome meant.
Right. And for those who sort of, follow along with that essentially what you're talking about is object-based beds to achieve those sort of positions in a consistent way.
Yeah, although what I'll say is rather than, when we think of a bed, I like to think of it as yes, but it's important to make sure that, like, I wrote this especially to be discrete channel. So realistically,
Yes.
when I'm tracking the music, and I think people need to recognize this. We do not record music in Dolby Atmos.
No,
we
we
record
do not.
music, and if you really need to get specific, we can record music in stereo, we can record music in 5 channel, we can record music in immersive. So I recorded the music actually at the college that I teach, beautiful studio where we did this at Humber College. It's a gorgeous studio. I was able to block book it for a month because there's total of 40 recording days in this project. A lot of recording.
That's a big project.
It's a big project, and it's also a film. So there's a film involved in every day there, capturing every performance, and then there's also some dance and nature and art additions to the film as well. But
that's amazing.
Yeah,
can't wait to see that.
Yeah, well, it's coming very soon.
Great.
But yeah, so we set up a 914. I didn't do the 6 in the studio because actually it made it so that no artist could walk into this to the chair.
Oh,
So we set up 914 with another member of the Atmos Facebook group, Alex Gamble, close friend of mine.
Okay.
Great mixer. He was the sort of co-engineer on the project, and we set up 914 and tracked with that and produced the whole record listening in immersive in real time. Just discrete channel, no renderer involved. It's not necessary. If anything, it's actually distracting because like when we record in stereo, it's good to have things in discrete channels so you can check phase, you can check time of arrival.
Yes.
But what an experience to be able to, not just for me to be able to shape the music in 3 dimensions in real time, but also for every artist who came in. Because they don't know, a lot of them don't know what this is. And they sit down in the chair, they listen for 20 seconds, and they know more than words could ever explain.
Wow.
All they need to do is hear it. If you show a brilliant artist, hey, you know those 10 layers that we just did? Come sit down and listen to this. And then they listen to it and it makes sense and it's well orchestrated and it's well balanced. You don't need to have a conversation. They get it instantaneously. And they just go back out. They go back out to the floor and like their brain locks. That's what great musicians do, right? Even on stage. I mean, that's what listening is. That's what music making is reaction. And so that was the best part about that thing is not just for me to be able to produce that way and sort of make sure that it's taking shape properly, but more importantly, to just blow the roof off the thing and see what happens when everybody's in.
Yeah, that's another level, I think. Like for a producer, like the whole point of a music producer, you know, a little different that word gets thrown around a lot, but a music producer's sort of job is to kind of, you know, make sure that that feeling that you're trying to convey is accurately portrayed, so that when somebody listens to this, it sort of comes through authentically, and that's really the ultimate job. You know, no matter how you achieve that in many different, you know, technologies or whatever, that's kind of what it is, right? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, we are in the production role, and you know, here it's like this is a multi-hat project where I'm a composer and a bassist and an engineer and a producer and a mixer, not a mastering engineer. In this project, Michael Romanowski mastered the record, and for good reason. And I did have co-engineers. I had co-producers, including a good friend of mine who plays violin on the project, Drew Jureka, and Morten Lindberg also did some additional production on the record with me, which was a dream.
Is that like for objectivity, like so that?
Yep, pure objectivity. Yep. That's at a certain point. I've got a lot of skills that I've developed in my life, but we can only go so far. And I love collaborating. Honestly, this record too, like I started writing the music end of COVID. By the time I got to the studio, I was like, I want nothing more than to be in the room with everybody and to just make music with people. There was even a time when I considered doing it a different way. And I was like, no, this is a go back to the studio and make a studio record. Now, I should state, you know, and some folks will be like, how the heck did you do this? In Canada, we do have grants that one can apply for. They're challenging and very hard to come by because we have such a talented community, but I had applied and so there are certainly not for the full funding. I definitely have invested a lot of my own into it. But the Canada Council for the Arts, Toronto Arts Council, Ontario Arts Council, you know, there's the ability to get this thing substantially off the ground, which is a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing for the ability to create art for art's sake. And it is being released with Ian Records. So that's Stefan Bach, who made Pure Audio Blu-ray.
Okay. Cool.
Stefan is like, I mean, when I think of Morten and Stefan, who came up with Pure Audio Blu-ray, that to me, they're the original of at least the Atmos world, because I mean, not, you know, there's a lot of people who are doing it right at that time. And again, there's so much history of it, but the Atmos world for me, because when I heard the first Pure Audio Blu-ray discs I got is the first time that I heard Atmos.
So it's the full circle moment for your journey, where it's what inspired you initially, and then now to come back that's incredible. That's amazing.
Stefan is Ian Records is an immersive audio label, so it's being released on Ian Records, And it's a beautiful thing. I mean, so building the community, and in specifically as a producer, our job is to build teams, right? You got to surround yourself with the right people. So the musicians, these are people I go back with. I've toured with, I've mixed for, I've mastered for, I've produced, the close friends, people I've known in various capacities, including my brother, who's the drummer, or one of the drummers.
Awesome.
So it's really a family affair to a degree. I feel like it's almost biographic in a way. It's like, just how can I bring all of these things together? But what's awesome is that it's actually the immersive inspiration of it got it started and is the core thread. And so I think where I left off for a little tangent there was like the 906 thing, or the 15 channel thing. So it's orchestrated that way. And as a result, I wanted to record it that way. And I have studied and done a lot of immersive recording of acoustic ensembles in the, taking great inspiration from people I've mentioned, Morton and Leslie Ann Jones, and others, Ian Cookley. So there's two people from the Echo Project that we can bring up later. These, but so many more. I mean, George Massenberg's work and Eric Schilling's work, and Richard King's work. I mean, so many engineers who have led the way in the classical realm of acoustic, surround, and then eventually immersive recording.
Yes.
I've studied it. I've done it professionally. I've taught it at a university level. But with this record, I'm recording a lot of acoustic instruments, a lot. Horn sections, brass, strings, drums, pianos, a lot of Indian instruments, sarangi, sarod, tabla.
And what was that one that you created again?
The bass vina.
Okay, while we're on this then, can you tell us a little bit about what that actually is? How do you play it? What's it made of? All of that stuff.
Sure. The bass vina is a hybrid fretless Indian bass instrument. As a bassist, when I started studying the music, I started studying on fretted bass, then eventually I started studying on fretless bass because of the nature of how the melodies work. There's a connectivity that is mandatory for expressing Indian classical music, that is the frets get in the way, or can get in the way, should I say.
I can imagine that, yeah.
Yeah, so instruments like sitar, sarod, sarangi, the ability to express the vocal nature of it is essentially mandatory. There are those who have broken the rules brilliantly, but as with all things in life.
Of course.
Anyway, so the fretless bass is 4 strings, but it's tuned 5-1, 5-1. So lower fifth tonic, lower fifth, or middle fifth, and upper tonic. There are 2 drone strings that I play with my thumb above the strings. So, and then a 10-string harp that is on top of it. That's sort of like it's not fully sympathetic because it's not running through the body. But it's in total, it is a 16-stringed instrument.
Oh my goodness!
But 4 playing strings and 2 drone strings primarily, which is not unlike sitar or sarod or sarangi, which are 3. And then rudra vina. So the name bass vina in Indian music, there's an instrument called the vina, the vina. Then there are many different variations of vina. The Saraswati vina, the Rudra Vina, and then eventually like variations more modern, like the Mohan Vina, or things which is Vishwa Mohan Bhatt made an instrument he called the Mohan Vina. So bass Vina is literally like saying sort of like bass Indian stringed instrument so it's like a very literal term, and it's a bass Vina. And so the way that I play it with my left hand, though, is very, very different than how I play electric bass. It's very much 1-2 finger sliding kind of techniques. And so this record features it, certainly the best I've been able to capture it to date. I'll give an example. So what does it mean to record this stuff? Like the difference between this record and a classical record is that this is a contemporary fusion record. I still want the drum set to feel like a combination of like a Headhunters record and a D'Angelo record and Brian Blade at the same time. I still want the keyboards to feel like, combinations of Herbie Hancock, but also combinations of like more ambient music. I want the piano to sound a certain way. I want the brass section to feel orchestral. I want the strings to feel orchestral, but I want the electric guitar to feel like a fusion record. Like it's a modern record. It's not classical music.
Yeah. So all your favorite things.
Yeah. Exactly. And it's a sound, right? It's a sound that there's a lot of acoustic instruments. So what I did was I designed for every single layer that was recorded. So it's 35 musicians. I say 38 artists because there's 3 dancers on the film project. I see it as a cinematic album. I see that as one piece of art. But
so they are one thing.
But there's 35 musicians. So that's 30. Now, some of those are grouped into groups like the brass ensemble or the string ensemble. But a lot of it is done film style, like overdub style. And that's so that I could record everything with immersive intent to the way I wanted. So the drums is close mics and arrays. The sarangi is way too quiet for large scale arrays, so it's close mics and height channels and very specifically oriented additional channels to capture the reflections, so that when I mix the sarangi in the mix where I want it, the reflections are already built into the mix.
Oh, I love that. Is it mostly live? Like everything's live?
Everything's live.
Okay, great.
But like overdub. But define live. Maybe I'll make sure that I'm answering it right.
So essentially, if something's quiet like that, where you would have to have close mics, but you do want the immersive quality of arrayed mics in the room to capture the acoustics, etc., then one way you could do that is to, like you said, overdub, like that part on top, so that you do get it by itself. And then you can
almost everything is overdub style for this reason.
Okay, there you go. That makes sense. Cool.
It was one of the parameters, when I started the project, there was, that was a major fork in the road. It was like, okay, obviously, if I get all the musicians in one room, I will have the benefit of time. Although I would dare anyone to try to get all these musicians in one room for 4 days straight. I dare them.
I can imagine. Yeah.
It took me a year to do this scheduling. And I'm not sure I could reproduce it. Some of these people are on tour. They play in, they're around the world, and they're heavy. They're incredible at what they do. So, but nevertheless, I digress. Let's say I could do that. Sure. Then you are going to have a scenario where no matter where you are in the world, I would lean into a classical approach with spot mics to recording this music. And what that would do is it would create, by the nature of the way that would have to get recorded, it would essentially force a certain acoustic aesthetic to the record, right? No matter how we do this, at a certain point, that bleed is going to bleed, and it's going to define. The space is going to make its way into every sound, which is a beautiful thing.
That's what we like. Yeah. Sometimes is the key word, I think. But it depends how you do that.
Exactly. But the way this record opens is 15 kalimba parts, all tracked for different speakers.
Wow.
There's a piece where the tabla, where we recorded different pitched tabla. I sort of co-composed it actually with the tabla player, Ed Hanley. And it's wild. And there's different pitches of tabla and different speakers, and it's very specifically orchestrated. It's impossible to create in nature. I don't care if you got 15 tabla players to learn the parts and put them on scaffolding to be above you and beside you. It wouldn't sound that way.
Is that because of discrete speakers?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I am a lover of both worlds. I love modern pop music. I love R&B. I love a good D'Angelo record or a Glasper record as much as I love a great Morton Lindbergh record or a Goat Rodeo record. It's one of my favorite acoustic recordings. And so I want to combine them. I'm not looking to create realism. I'm looking to create surrealism, like full out. But with lots of realism involved.
Yeah. Well, I think it's like that perfect combination you were talking about where, the technology exists so we can push to the envelope of what you just can't do in nature, like you said. In this case, just to reiterate it, placing a sound in a specific speaker only without the acoustics that would happen in real life of it hitting around and you hearing it, the reflections to the other side of you or whatever. So that's not happening. And then you have multiple versions of different pieces that are all in different speakers, giving you a technological Atmos immersive experience as opposed to what would happen in real life. And then also appreciating what happens in real life and capturing that very accurately as well, blending those together, and that is your art. Is that what you're saying?
Correct.
I love that.
Yeah.
That is awesome.
So for instance, like if I pick any of the instruments, electric guitar, well, I knew that I wanted the electric guitar orchestrated in certain ways, so I used multiple amps in the room and discrete capture, but multiple amps in the room around an array and like in the way that I wanted it to be.
Yes.
Now, you put 2 Fender Twins and a couple Princetons in a room, there's no point in recording a string section in the same room at the same time. Not if you want the guitar tone, right? So you do it separately. And now I've got, it means that I have 19 channels for a guitar take. It does. But that just disappears. Like honestly, I did mix videos for this whole record that will come out this year. And the amount of times that I was doing it, and I was reminded how little equalization and compression I had to do in mixing. It was just all there. It's just captured in, like, because I knew what I wanted. I'd already orchestrated it. Or we were, inventing it in real time, like, because we had the collaborative nature of the project. And then we just made decisions. Okay, yeah, we need mics. Okay, this is sounding really good, but it feels hollow in this zone. Boom, there's a pair of microphones. Problem solved. And I'm not saying I didn't fix things in post or manipulate in post. I'll do whatever I want. And I did a lot of crazy things in post, but most of it, the core of it, the very center of it was built that way. For instance, I would say everything I recorded, I moved very, very little of it after the fact in post. Even like 19 channels worth of mics on a guitar, for instance. What I did do is I changed levels. In the mixing phase, I now have all of this close, medium, and far, like basically spatial content. And then as I'm trying to totally balance things together, of course there can be, eventually you can't have it all. So it's all about automation. The mixing is 95% automation, just volume. It's just distribution of energy, but the decorrelated information exists at the source. And what inspired me to do that, on top of appreciating it from my work in acoustic or from my being inspired by our colleagues who are so freaking amazing at what they do in the classical world, and being so moved by those recordings, I've also had to solve the puzzle thousands of times now of remixing content that wasn't recorded that way. And so every day I wish that some element had been recorded differently so that I could truly do what I want with it. Every day I'm opening some song and being like, ooh, this choir.
If only.
If I could just go and record this choir with just a quad array, just front and back information, or just decorrelated height information, this thing would explode. So what do? We build it with reverbs. We build it with decorrelating tools. We build it with Haas effects, whatever we got to do. And it can be awesome, but it's never quite the same as just getting it at the source, because, and Morten Lindberg describes this the best, so I won't try to paraphrase, but he describes something that was so heavy, which is our brain and our ability, our psychoacoustic mechanism is so advanced, and it is hypersensitive to time of arrival, and it's hypersensitive to how nature works, because it's a part of our survival mechanism. So when something is not real, the brain just knows it. It doesn't mean it doesn't appreciate it. We can still be moved. We can still love it. It could be better, actually, than doing it acoustically. So it's not a better or worse. But when it's done properly, with great care, and time of arrival is nailed in an immersive recording context, the brain just settles and just experiences. And it's the best. And
that's next level.
It's so next level. And I've studied Morten. I've appreciated Morten's recordings for years now, and had chances to work with him now, and to be we've been at many conferences together. We were just in Mexico, where we actually had a good amount of time to spend and talk, and for me, I consider him, even though we're like collegial, I mean, I can, he's an unsolicited mentor to me as someone that I look up to, and I admire greatly the aesthetics and the skills and just the artistic output. And so when I'm like, and it just makes so much sense. It's like even when I'm mixing pop music, what I don't want it to sound like a classical record, but I want that feeling. And that feeling is natural envelopment. That feeling is when your body and your brain and your ears and everything just totally accepts the immersive experience. And that's when the technology disappears.
Yes. I've spoken about that at length before. That's honestly what this podcast is about, trying to find that. Because that is the whole point. Like, that's the reason we want this. Because, I mean, I suppose whether it's a story or a, an emotion within music or anything that we're building here that is the art, I suppose the whole point of all of it is to try and feel something like that is just so powerful and human. And I think, what Dolby Atmos and other techniques, all the things that you're explaining here are aiming to do at the end of the day is all bring us back to that feeling that makes us feel the best of ourselves and just fully immersed. For lack of a better word, that's it.
That's why the record's named what the record is named. And
there's no better name.
Yeah, it's the feeling. And the thing in this, the unique part about this project, so all of these things, like what I described about the guitar is like for every single instrument. And that's what some of those videos are. And I documented almost every one of those days. So I have a lot of stuff still to share.
That's a big feat even in itself.
I know.
I can't imagine. I know. Imagine. How many tracks did you end up with? Like, how many tracks did you actually end up with in a...
The biggest song has close to 1,000.
Oh my God. That's a crazy amount of tracks.
Now, that particular song, though, it's called Tapestry. The way that like a lot of them have 400 to 500, just bare bass level. Yeah. There's 8 songs in total, and they're all pretty long songs. I mean, long, like 7-8 minute kind of territory. I like to write kind of through composed music.
Sure, yeah, especially to film, like.
Yeah, it's cinematic,
whatever
kind
it
of
takes,
music.
Wherever it takes
exactly. You. Exactly. So, but a couple of songs get into like the 600-700 range. It's all at 96. My I had to get a RMU set up again just to mix the record. I couldn't. Even the best Mac Studio I have couldn't even dream of handling it.
That's insane. That's rivaling the top films. Even that amount of tracks is
the Tapestry song. So Tapestry is this 4th song on the record. I co-wrote it with a friend of mine named Sean Rompre, and there's a huge theme, especially off the top of the song, of Foley being like the groove. So sort of super hi-fi industrial, and like I recorded hundreds of different metallic, like dropping forks and knives, sometimes with mono mic, sometimes with immersive concepts. But I did a significant, like weeks and weeks of manipulation in sound particles to create sort of multi-channel. Anyone who understands sound particles, you can create digital arrays. And so it's amazing. And so I would put 400 fork samples, all recorded, no samples, no internet. It's like I dropped a fork or 10 forks, and with sheps and DPAs like on a piece of metal. I mean, I lost my mind. I lost it. That's why it's taken so long.
You just kept going to the max. But I love that.
Yeah, it's just like I whatever. That's the joy of being everything on the project is like, well, whatever. I've delayed the release of it like 3 times. I didn't tell anyone else, so it didn't matter. But
well, it's going to be what you wanted now. Like at least, like you just haven't stopped. Like you didn't sacrifice anything. The point was, it's going to be right. The end.
Yeah, and actually, I'd like to come back to that. But to finish it off is like, so I put 200, 300 fork samples into sound particles and then build a 3-second gesture out of it.
Oh my God.
Right? And you can set up crazy immersive arrays that then you bring into Pro Tools afterwards. And then you've got, so like there alone, let's say I set it up as a 916 array in sound particles. Well, if I do that 40 times, boom, track count just goes through the roof.
Yeah.
So, it's not like more tracks is better, but it's like rather than just having like there's no stem out. Like the stem out, the stem or the track is 916. Like that's for this record, most instruments is like that's their capture is a 3-dimensional image at the source every time. Or if it's something like kalimba, which can't really be 3-dimensional, or at least not as far as I could get it, then we orchestrated it for all the speakers. So you do 15 overdubs.
Right. Okay. So would that not be? Well, with doing that, like there's so many ways you could do that, but was it not enough to use it as, let's say, the reverb in the room? So you wanted discrete. It's
too quiet.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Kalimba is so quiet that it can't engage a space. Not that space, at least. You'd have to be in some micro environment or something. Maybe if you
put it in a guitar.
Put it in a guitar, sure. If you could create a micro environment, you could do something. But in this case, I didn't do that.
Yeah, sure. Fair enough.
So, but it's cool because then Marito Marquez, who's the kalimba player, but also a sick drummer, again, I ask him, okay, you know how it is. Like, imagine a kalimba player and you're like, okay, you're working in stereo. You're like, okay, I'm going to do 4 layers. No problem. They do 1, they do 2, they do 3, they do 4. I'm like, okay, I want 15 layers. At a certain point, the artist is going to be like, why?
Yeah, there's like,
even your closest friend is going to be like, in their headphone mix, they're like, this is starting to become dumb after about 5. But when they come in the room and Marito sits there and hears 5 of them in a 5-channel thing, he's the one who wants to go do the other 10. Because he's like, this is the coolest thing. This is the best experience ever. Can I, so again, it's totally different when you can get everybody creatively engaged.
Yes. Yeah. You know what I was going to say about that and the fact that, you have this full circle thing going on and, in the release, but also, getting your family involved and people that you really connect with in like a deep real life level. That actually goes a long way into the whole process of doing this as well. It's not just the technology and the skills. It's the whole feeling of everybody coming together for the same task and the care that's just embedded into that, just between the people even. All that sort of stuff absolutely translates. It's, it's the difference between making something that's just for a paycheck or something you actually give a crap about.
Yeah, and that's why
it matters,
Yeah, and that's why, fast forwarding, there is a stereo version of this album because, again, and actually this does lead into the point I sort of want to make about artistic intent is I look forward to sharing the music, right? And at a certain point, I always knew stereo was there, lurking in the corner, because if I want to share,
what story? No,
just in the sense that I wrote this thing for 15 channels, 616 by the time the LFE gets in there. I tracked it that way. I composed it that way. I produced it that way. At no point, at any point in my mixing, until the masters were done in Atmos, did I once think of it in stereo. I didn't fold it down. I didn't listen to it because it's not what it is.
That's how I see a film even. It's the same thing. Exactly.
And what was empowering here, like this is where it's different. If I'm an engineer for your song, I can't really that's not really my call to make, right? That's our call to make. If you say, Justin, I don't care, make it wild, go for it. I'm not really fussed about the fold down nature of it. It doesn't need to match my stereo master. Make your thing. Cool. Off to the races. But if you very reasonably say, hey, I just worked for a year to make this record. I worked for 2 years to make this record. These stereo masters are a representation of the very core of my being, which most stereo masters are to people for good reason. I would like you to maturely, turn this into a 3-dimensional mix, but this is a map to my intent. Sometimes in our community, people get fussed about it shouldn't match the stereo master. It's not about that. There are no rules, but at the end of the day, it's about artistic intent. So if I'm mixing for someone else, there's a discussion about that. And it's very common that they say, yeah, I mean, I worked on the stereo version for a long time. It's not the stereo version. It is the version. It's it.
Yes.
It's a screw stereo Atmos. Doesn't matter. It's it. It is the music. Stereo is the music.
Yes.
It is now just the thing. So for me this time, there's two things that happen. First of all, I'm going the other direction, but whatever. Lots of people have done that before as well. So that's powerful. But because it's my music, it was very empowering to be able to make that decision at a core level and say, I am making this. Like the sculptor who makes the thing for the square, I want to make this. And I want to make it exactly what I imagine it to be. And of course, one day someone may listen to it and they may like it or they may not. Such is art, right? Such is art.
Sure.
But I like it. I am very confident with it. I like it the way that's the art that I want to express. And that's the point of being an artist.
Absolutely.
And it was super empowering to get back on this side of it. And I allowed myself the space to say, in my ideal scenario, someone hears this in 916 or in a movie theater. And that's why there's a dedicated cinema remix of it. It's not a 916 placed in a theater. It's a dedicated mix for it. That's where I want someone to hear it. Now, can I have that for everybody? Nope. That's going to be a limited amount of people. So as an artist, I have to ask myself, well, do I want to limit the amount of people who hear this? Which is I could do it. No one is stopping me. There's no, even Stefan at the label. If I said to Stefan, we are releasing this only as 916 discrete channel audio. I don't care how people listen to it. That's what I made. He'd do it. I bet he'd do it. Which is awesome. Makes Stefan awesome.
It certainly is. Yeah.
But that's not my intent. I have the intent to share this music with more people. So I put it into the Atmos container, and I'm okay with it in 714. I'm okay with it in 5.1. I'm not okay with it in stereo.
You just have a quality check that is the minimum viable, and you're saying stereo does not fit into that?
No. So stereo does, but not a full down.
Oh, okay. So it's a remix.
From the ground up.
Wow. Okay. Complete remix. Okay.
And honestly, there was a moment where I didn't want that to be the case because of the amount of work that it meant.
So much work.
It extended the record by 6 months for me.
Wow.
And this is, again,
crazy.
This is where having co-producers, this is where having teams is valuable, because at a certain point, I put in so many hours, like an insane, a stupid amount of hours. I've enjoyed the hours, but it's a silly amount of hours. I finally finished it. Michael Romanowski's finished the Atmos masters. The art has reached its thing. Then I did the cinema remix. Even then, I did the cinema remix before thinking of it in stereo. Binaural and spatial, as a side note, did enter into the process for me at like the 95% line.
And how are you with the binaural?
I'm fine.
Okay.
I use settings. I use settings to translate. In no way was I ever going to sacrifice the 916.
Of course.
And I'm fine with it. Like, is it the same?
Okay.
Nope. Am I happy if someone hears it and is moved? Yes.
Okay. But the stereo, it doesn't work.
So much information. It's too much. The time of arrival issue, right? When you start to take all of those spatial cues and you add, it falls apart. The imaging, the detail. So the answer, and this is where my co-producer Drew was the one to be like, oh, dude, this fold down sucks. And I was like, I know, I wanted it so badly. I wanted nothing more. It's worked for me before. It did not work. And so, right, because it's micro timing times 500.
So the phase, is it just terrible phasing?
I think at the end of the day, it is phase, but not in the way where it was like immediately like, oh, this is out of phase. It was more just like, yes, when you put too much information on top of itself, like if you recorded this record for stereo, you would never have that much information. It's not important. In fact, it's distracting. That's why someone would look at it and be like, why would you put that many mics? And the answer is, for stereo, I would not. That's a bad idea. So
Yeah.
so I
Because it's
went
916.
yeah, because it's for 916. So I took the whole record. I turned every immersive bus, which everything was into 916 auxes, just like you'd mix a stereo record, except everything was 916. Like even on an
Wow.
instrument, even on a sub instrument level, because I could constantly, just be playing in that space. But I stripped all that, turned them all into stereo panners. Nice thing about Pro Tools is the plugins, typically you can keep the plugins, you can keep the automation, you can keep the editing.
Yes. So you just change it back down to stereo.
I went through the process of just building it, even reorchestrating the music for what's left, what's right, because now back and front needs to have a new conversation, and
Yeah.
it's its own mix. And another thing I did when I was doing that for myself, and Drew, my co-producer, was really involved in the stereo mix. I needed it at that point. I needed it. I needed perspective. Is I didn't listen to the Atmos again. I didn't compare it the other way either. I was like, okay, I'm making a stereo record right now, and I want to love this.
Okay, well, that's a really important distinction there, because I think people tend to look at the stereo like we've spoken about before as the re-render of the Atmos, which comes from that. This is completely, in essence, a brand new thing. It's the same songs, but it's a completely different entity that can't be compared.
The first time that I ever compared them, like literally, obviously, I have the power, right? I'm one sound flow button away, but artistically I didn't want to, because I just I'm the composer, right? And like I did some co-composition with people as well, but I'm the composer, I'm the producer. I know the music. I know it I know it better than anybody. I know exactly what it is. Again, that's not to say that it's right or wrong, but I know the music. And so
it's yours.
Therefore the feeling and the essence of the music is my decision. And of course, then I welcome other people into that, which is co-producers and things like that, to have other opinions. But at its core, I'm chasing a feeling, and I know that feeling. And also, I've spent enough time with it that I know the feeling really well. I know every note, every single thing on this record.
And you know what it's all designed to feel, or what it should feel like. Yeah.
So when I'm mixing it in stereo, I'm just chasing the same thing I was mixing it in immersive. Just it has to happen a whole whackload of different ways. I added new effects. I changed EQs. I, had to compress more. I had to carve more. I hardly had to carve anything in immersive. I had to carve the crap out of it to fit in 2 channels.
It's very difficult going back.
It was very hard. It was very hard. And I had to allow myself to essentially, for a period of time, forget what I made, because I actually had to take time off. The first time I was mixing it, I think I just felt disappointed, and that's not how you making art feeling disappointed. That sucks.
Yeah.
So I took time off, took like a couple months at least, and then just came back to it and was like, okay, I'm just gonna mix this thing until I like it. And the only time that I ever compared the two was once Michael had mastered both.
And what was the end result there? How did you feel?
Yeah, I mean, the spatial version is still contains every ounce of what I want it to be. It hits, and I'm like, yep, this is it. This is the thing. It is a little less bright overall. Bass was treated a little bit differently, because in the immersive version, there's so much full range bass content all around you that it didn't need to be as like tight and punchy. In fact, it was a little distracting when it was. Where the stereo version is like a little more compressed, little bit brighter overall, bass, and a little bit more smiley face. If I look at it that way, it's like it, because you just don't have the same.
I tend to hear that in stereo anyway.
Yeah, I mean the mid range just builds up, right? You got to carve that mid range. You got to create space. Especially this is pretty dense music, so yeah, it has its own kind of tonal curve. But I think that anyone who listened to both of them, the story is the same. The melodic story, the harmonic story, the compositions live. And yeah, so that was part of the process. But
yeah, sounds like you hit your potential.
Yeah, the best I could, the best I possibly could, and including the advice of people who I really trust, like the people on the team. So but yeah, the liberating part of it is to be able to go to that artistic side, and And what I want to see, we were talking about this earlier, is like, I want that to be, I think that's something us, not maybe everybody in the community wants to do this, but I'm inspired to, I know you are, like, I want to create that space for artists who may very well not yet know that this is their canvas. Because I think we're going to hear some crazy stuff. I think it's going to get good.
I cannot wait to see what people do with this, especially, leading the way with stuff like that you've done with your album there, and really trying to be as innovative and creative as possible, showing people, hey, this is what you can do. There's one way that it could end up. And like, the more this happens, the more people sort of get excited about it and go, wow, I have a cool idea. Maybe no one's tried before. And that's the cool part about it. It's like just complete expression.
Totally.
It's amazing. Well, man, I think we've covered heaps of amazing things. Thank you so much for coming on with me. I don't know how long we've actually been talking now, but like, I think it's one of the longer episodes. But I really appreciate everything that you've brought to me today. And yeah, is there anything you wanted to like push or plug or anything like that? Maybe the album again, but anything else you want to quickly talk about before we wrap up?
No, I mean, if folks want to keep in touch, I'm keeping Instagram up to date. So Justin Gray Sound is the handle. There's also a website, justingraysound.com, where there's a lot more detail and musical examples and playlists and photos and all that kind of stuff. And then from a record standpoint, I know the record will be released in late August. That'll be the Blu-ray specifically. The Blu-ray to me is the consumer format of the album because it contains the film and the high resolution Atmos.
Well. Okay.
It's actually the only way to experience as a consumer Atmos and film outside of a movie theater.
Is there any streaming services that you could potentially be doing with that? Maybe Amazon Prime, I think, can do that, maybe?
Sorry, unless it got onto a film streaming service, of course.
Right, okay.
As a music project. And sure,
Right, okay.
if somehow it could be on Apple TV, which, hey, knock, 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 I'm into it, or Amazon Prime or Netflix, there are various film services that would host it as cinema or as television. But in this case, the Blu-ray is the way to hear true HD and watch the film at the same time.
Will you be shipping to Australia and other places? A lot of my audience probably is.
Yeah, it'll all be
Australian?
through Ian Records. So the Ian Records ships worldwide. They're awesome. Stefan is there, and but of course, the record will also be streamed on all of the various platforms, and in Atmos we're available, and in stereo as well. The videos will eventually all make their way to YouTube, obviously in stereo.
Beautiful.
And yeah, some singles start soon. I think the first single is looking like mid to late June, which is coming up from where we are today, and then a couple others leading up to the release. And especially on the channel. I love educating. I love sharing. I love this stuff. I love the community, which is why I really appreciate being here with you today. And
coming on.
Yeah, there's a lot of fun content still in the pipeline about the record. Mixed videos and more microphone videos and things like that. That'll keep being the content that accompanies it. But for me, I hope that the content is obviously it's hopefully inspiring people to want to listen to the music, which is my ask, but also giving and being something of a good resource for folks.
Be sure to check out our next episode, continuing with Justin, where we find out exactly what it took to remix the album Doggy Style by Snoop Dogg in Dolby Atmos and a whole lot more. We'll see you there. Thanks for listening to Beyond Stereo, the Dolby Atmos podcast. If you like what you heard, check out some of our other episodes available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Buzzsprout, and YouTube. And be sure to look out for more exciting guests very, very soon. See you there.